It started on an ordinary afternoon, but within minutes, the peace of my neighborhood was shattered. Imagine stepping out of your own garage, only to have someone scream at the top of their lungs that you've stolen their car while standing on your property. The HOA Karen didn't just accuse me. She called 911 and tried to turn the entire neighborhood against me. What followed wasn't just a misunderstanding. It spiraled into one of the most bizarre and infuriating HOA disputes I've ever faced. So, what really happened when the police arrived? And whose car did they believe it was? When I first moved into the neighborhood, I thought I had found the perfect place to settle down. The homes were well kept, the streets were quiet, and on the surface, everyone seemed friendly enough. My garage became a little sanctuary, a place where I kept my tools, worked on weekend projects, and, most importantly, parked my car. To me, it was just the rhythm of normal life. At first, everything felt smooth. I waved to neighbors, tended to my yard, and followed every rule in the HOA handbook, no matter how trivial they seemed. I didn't complain about the strict trash pickup times, the endless lawn care reminders, or even the mandatory paint color suggestions. I figured playing by the book would mean peace of mind. But there was something simmering beneath the surface of this perfect community. Every smile felt a little forced. Every glance lingered a little too long. And though most neighbors minded their own business, there was always one who seemed to watch more closely than the rest. She had a reputation, someone who thrived on control, who used HOA rules like weapons, and who never missed a chance to remind others that she decided what was acceptable here. I didn't know at the time, but the smallest, most ordinary moment, simply opening my garage, would be all it took to set her off and drag me into a conflict I never saw coming. The first real sign of trouble came only a week after the garage incident. At first, I thought it would blow over, that the shouting, the false accusation, and even the unnecessary 911 call would just fade into neighborhood gossip. But that wasn't how things worked here. Instead, the HOA seized a moment like sharks smelling blood in the water. It started with a letter. A simple notice tucked under my doormat, stamped with the HOA's official seal. It accused me of violating community trust and demanded a written explanation for suspicious behavior regarding property ownership. My hands shook as I read it. How could opening my own garage and driving my own car be considered suspicious? I had title documents, registration, proof of ownership. But it didn't matter. In their eyes, the complaint alone was enough to justify scrutiny. Within days, another notice arrived, this one citing me for improper garage use. According to the HOA bylaws, garages were to be used primarily for vehicle storage, not for secondary activities. The fact that I kept tools and a workbench inside became their weapon. It didn't matter that dozens of neighbors did the exact same thing. Suddenly, I was being threatened with fines of $100 per day if I didn't restore my garage to its intended purpose. At first, I laughed. It seemed absurd, but the more letters that piled up, the less funny it became. Fines for weeds that weren't there. Complaints about noise disturbances when I wasn't even home. A warning about parking violations when my car was neatly tucked inside the garage. Each one felt like a carefully calculated strike, meant to wear me down, to corner me until I gave up or slipped up. Karen, because that's what everyone called her, even behind closed doors, took it upon herself to start documenting my every move. She walked her dog past my house 3, sometimes 4 times a day, phone in hand, snapping pictures whenever I stepped outside. If I trimmed a hedge, she took a photo. If I unloaded groceries, she took a photo. If I so much as lingered in the driveway, she stood there, muttering into her phone, sending evidence straight to the HOA board. The harassment wasn't just annoying, it was suffocating. Imagine living under constant surveillance. Every action twisted into a violation. I stopped working on projects in my garage, afraid it would fuel another accusation. I stopped inviting friends over, embarrassed they might be confronted or reported. My home, which was supposed to be my safe place, started to feel like a prison. One evening, I came home to find a neon orange sticker plastered across my front door. Final notice, hearing scheduled. They were summoning me to a board meeting to determine disciplinary action. The charges? repeated noncompliance with community guidelines. The list of alleged violations was ridiculous. Garage misuse, suspicious vehicle activity, improper landscaping, and even failure to maintain community harmony. Failure to maintain harmony. That was the moment it hit me. This wasn't about rules or fines or even the car. This was about control. They wanted to break me down, to make an example out of me, to remind the neighborhood what happens when you stand up to the wrong person. Still, I prepared. I gathered paperwork, receipts, photographs, even sworn statements from friends who knew the truth. On the night of the hearing, I walked into that meeting hall with my head high. The board members sat in a semicircle like judges at a trial, their faces cold and unreadable. Karen sat in the front row, arms crossed, eyes blazing with smug satisfaction. The first hour was a blur of accusations. They read each violation aloud, never once acknowledging my evidence. Every time I tried to speak, I was cut off. When I held up documents proving ownership of my car, they dismissed it as inconclusive. When I pointed out the selective enforcement of garage rules, they claimed I was being defensive. It was a show trial, and the verdict had already been decided. By the end, they announced their decision. I was being fined $5,000, stripped of community privileges, and given 30 days to correct my behavior. Failure to comply, they warned, could result in legal action, including a lien on my home. It felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. My car, my garage, my home, all suddenly at risk because of a neighbor's obsession and an HOA's unchecked power. I walked out of that room, humiliated, but also burning with determination. Because here's the thing about people who think they can control you. They underestimate how far you'll go to fight back. I started documenting everything. Every letter, every notice, every fine. I kept it all in a folder. I set up cameras around my property, recording Karen's harassment, her late-night prowling, her endless photos, and accusations. I even began researching state HOA laws, digging into legal precedents, case studies, and homeowner rights most people never even knew existed. The more I dug, the more I realized something. They weren't just wrong, they were vulnerable. Several of their so-called rules had no legal backing. Their fines, in many cases, exceeded the maximum allowed by state law. And their harassment? It bordered on defamation and invasion of privacy. Suddenly, the power dynamic shifted. They had been watching me, but now I was watching them. And that's when the real escalation began. One night, as I was reviewing my security footage, I caught something shocking. Karen, standing at my garage door, phone in hand, snapping photos, not just from the sidewalk, but on my property. She had stepped over the line, literally and legally. It was trespassing, plain and simple. That clip became my weapon. But instead of using it right away, I waited. Because I knew something bigger was coming. And when it did, I'd be ready. Walking out of that meeting felt like stepping into fresh air after weeks of suffocation. For the first time since the nightmare began, I wasn't the one shrinking under the HOA's power. They were. The board had been cornered, their threats exposed, and Karen's credibility shattered in front of her neighbors. But as satisfying as that moment was, I knew it wasn't the end. What mattered now was what came after, the fallout, the consequences, and whether justice would truly hold.